Sohale, Naveed, thank you guys so much for joining me in this conversation about your short film main character energy. This is gonna be a
Thank you.
really fun one to talk about. Before we jump into conversation about that, let's start with a synopsis for those who are maybe just discovering the film. Sohale,
Sure.
can you give me a quick synopsis on what this film is about?
Yeah, it's basically about the uh pretty much the rigorous audition process when an actor goes into a movie. But there's some underlying messages here as well that relates to gender norms in the entertainment industry and society at large. But if I were to give you a one liner, I would say it's about an actor who goes into an open casting call, but there's an important detail in the character description that he misses, and that a spoiler alert, and that little detail that he misses is that the gender of the characters that he's reading for, because all the character names are androgynous names, and nobody really in that office knows what the hell is going on.
Yeah, it's so interesting to watch the story unfold and also kind of see the conversations that's happening around these kind of topics. And your lead actors, Mark and Taylor, just really worked well together in this for many
Thank
reasons. And
you.
there's certainly a moment in the movie that I want to talk about when we get there.
Absolutely.
So for both of you, the writer of this script is Nicholas Beno. And I am so curious, when the script came to you and you read it, for both of you, what was your very first initial reaction to the script?
I'll first let me talk about where the script came from really quickly. Um, at the time, I think it was summer of a couple of years ago, and I just wanted something cost effective to make that was also funny. And Nick and I have this twisted sense of humor, and I was like, "Dude, can you write a short film?" And he's like, 12 years ago in college, I actually wrote like a 7, 8 page short about an audition because he went to film school, and I was like, let me read it. I read it. I thought it was hilarious. I thought the subject matter was relevant given today's. I mean, everybody's talked about gender in the last 5 years. Whether you like to be involved in that conversation or not, it's come up. And I read it. I loved it, and I thought we could push it even further because I already knew Mark is a good friend of mine, so I already knew we wanted him to play the lead. So I was like, let's make some jokes at his expense. Let's make it a little bit more about him, and essentially everyone would kind of play a little version of themselves, right? Making a play within a play. And we added the audition scene. It wasn't in there. We thought it would be hilarious to put it in. And I think that, and Navid can touch on this as well. That audition scene is one of our favorites. I think I had a blast making it. Everybody liked that scene, so I think it worked well. And then we actually filmed it. I hadn't talked to Navid yet about it. We filmed it, and I had a different direction I wanted to go with the music, but then we're talking to him and literally on a daily basis for a couple of months, figuring out what works, and then he just worked his magic.
Yeah, Naveed. Music for me is such a important part of a film. Some of my favorite movies ever are in large part because of the score and how the music kind of complements the story being told. So tell me about your part in getting involved with this short film. What got you on board and yeah, kind of clue us in on these discussions that you had with Sohail about what the tone should be.
We went back and forth quite a lot, and you know, at first, we were thinking, is this kind of like a modern Chaplin, picture where it's almost as if there's a live pianist playing along with the screen, but that intro though with Mark's performance, was just great. It just grabbed me, that when he's about to go into the audition room and I've never been in an actual audition room. I'm not an actor or anything, but but the sense I could understand the sense just based on his acting and how well he portrays this nervous actor going in. And so at first the intro was completely different. It was leaning into his anxiety, and it was this very drony sort of just intense music that we were opening up with, and it worked fine in terms of just kind of the storytelling and getting into Mark's head, but really it just wasn't hitting right. So we were like, we're setting the tone for this film, is this the tone we want to set for the opening? And so we actually started from scratch and did the Charlie Chaplin sort of style with just piano, as if we're scoring, like, writing directly to screen, like, and it just worked perfectly. Like, as soon as I put the first piano notes, like, against the picture, it just blended perfectly with the storytelling. And then from there, it was just kind of, it just wrote itself based on just setting the tone there. I just let the performances of Taylor and Mark just carry the music, and I just fed off of them. Their performances were so great. Taylor is so good. Their the way they interact with each other in the chaos of the audition room itself, was just all the different things and emotions that I played off of.
That's so cool to hear about, and I get all of those vibes from this movie, and so much of that works together to make this work. We'll talk about comedy here in a little bit, because that's a really interesting topic to talk about in film. But another thing, that a parallel that I kind of wanted to touch on, because Sohail, you play the director in the film that you're
Sure.
directing, and so
Yeah.
there's kind of this interesting parallel that
It's a
you
play.
have
It's a
with.
play within a play.
Exactly.
And
Talk to me about that.
absolutely. Let me touch on something Naveed said about the music as well. If you pay attention and watch the film several times, we kind of gave every character kind of their own tone. So the piano kind of changed for every character. It's only until Taylor and Mark start bumping heads that their separate themes collapse into one another, right? And it works
Mhm.
even better in the audition scene. But when we first started rewriting that script, Nick and I originally, the idea was let's have everyone play a version of themselves. Obviously, it didn't work out that way because some of the like the person that played the casting director, she's not a casting director in real life. So we went away from that idea, and Nick was actually supposed to play the producer that sits next to me, but he at that time he had moved to Ohio, so he couldn't be on set. So we got somebody else. We just thought it would be funny if we just played ourselves, kind of like a Shakespearean. Yeah, it's a play within a play, and who else to play the asshole pompous director than myself? I mean, it's obviously an exaggerated version of myself, but why would I get anybody else to play it? In the last couple of short films that I've been in, I've only put myself in the background, and it was just suitable for me to have lines as the director who's also directing this short.
Yeah, I just thought that was such a it was so interesting to have like that comedic ironic touch to this film. And so
I
I
hope
was
I did well.
you did. I mean, I would cast you
Oh,
for
thank
that
you,
role.
thanks, man. Thanks.
No,
I
it's
didn't,
great.
guys. I didn't pay Thomas to say that, by the way. No Venmo transactions.
That's funny. Um, you had mentioned working with some of the team before. Your previous short film was Taste the Difference. And
Yeah.
so you worked with some of the team on that project that also worked on this project. Tell me a little bit more about your dynamic with the people that you work with in this film.
So I come from a background of sales, so building relationships is like the number one thing you do, especially in an industry like this. Because if I'm gonna work with someone and they actually turn out to be beneficial in my team, why would I risk working with somebody? Why would I risk bringing somebody else on if I've already vetted this person? So it tastes the difference. Mark was that was actually during COVID. We shot it with a skeleton crew, and I had only met Mark a couple of years prior. And we kept saying, "Hey, we got to work together. We got to work together." And Nick wrote that one as well. I mean, the script was so short. He wrote it pretty fast, and then we did a couple of rewrites on it. And at the time, I had just met Paulie as well, who was a cinematographer, who was Nick's friend from Ohio. And Paulie and I had been discussing, hey, let's work. This 5 minute short Taste the Difference turned out to be a good trial and error with everybody that I knew, and see let's see where we can take this. And at the end of that, like I have actor friends who are like, hey, are you going to put me in your next thing? I mean, if the role is right, yes. Obviously, when you live in a city like LA or New York or anywhere where there's like ton of actors you become friends with, you can't just put everybody in it, right? It just doesn't work out that way.
Unless you're Christopher Nolan.
Unless, well, yeah, if you have like 40,000 different actors in the back, yeah, everybody come in, the whole role can come in. Or if the budget is there, but
Right.
even main character energy, we shot it on such a low budget, and the only thing that really made it successful was the people that were involved, down to the production assistant. I genuinely could not have done it in 2 days if everybody wasn't on the same page, and I'm so happy I met the right people. And then for this one, I brought on Naveed because it was so character driven that I needed somebody that I trusted. Plain and simple. I just couldn't go to like Google, hey, I need a composer and just get some random person. I need a talent on this. I mean, if I was going to put my all into it, I need other people that are going to put their all into it. And that's how I hope he works with me again. I don't know.
I hope so too.
Well, our last collaboration, in Sentient, was just such a different sounding film, and that's part of the reason why this one was so fun, it was just tapping into that sort of comedy realm, but also there's that audition scene that just completely flips it around
Mm-hmm.
and gets into sort of that cliche heroic story,
Yeah.
Marvel or something.
Mm-hmm.
We actually, yeah, Navi, the first short film I made in Sentient was when we both lived in DC. He was going to music school up in Boston, and I just wanted to make something. And I was like, I made this short film. It was a complete suspense thriller with a bloodbath at the end. So coming full circle, well, doing a 180, and now we're doing a straight up comedy. I don't know, it just worked.
It's so fascinating to see that progression from going to horror. I know Taste the Difference has horror elements to it, but
Yeah, it was
also
like a spectrum and moving to the other side of the
it
I
spectrum.
was
really
I was completely shocked. I mean, like I was surprised. I was like, wait, is this a total like straight up comedy? So I was like very taken by surprise, but I knew that so it will do a good job, with any genre, So it's just whatever genre you choose, So I'm the type of collaborator that I feed off of that energy, and I like working on projects that I know are everyone involved is giving 110%, and and they care about the details. And so we went back and forth quite a lot, like even more than like much more than the typical collaboration, because we both have a sense of like, hey, we want this to be perfect, we want to get the most out of each other, so I had to kind of convince him to, sometimes it was a kind of a tug of war kind of situation sometimes too, but at the end, I feel like the result speaks for itself. From my perspective, it works.
I think
I was
so.
texting him at like 2 a.m. sometimes with ideas, and I think he blocked me at some point. I don't know.
Needed a couple of days of rest,
That's funny, but that's also a really great segue into comedy and film. I would be so nervous to write a comedy film because I would just have all this anxiety about like how is it going to translate from page to screen? Do people think that what I think is funny? Do they think it's funny?
Yeah.
Tell me about comedy in this film and that translation from the page to the screen and how your direction helped facilitate that.
First of all, it started with a great script. Nick did a fantastic job because even when you're writing the script, I think pacing obviously is important. But when you're especially going with something like comedy, because everything I produced a feature called like Active Shooter. I mean, the thing was a bloodbath. So coming from all this, I think I've grown up as a person because I had all this anger. I think now I'm a little bit happier. Therapy has helped. So I think the comedy route, I think that the dark comedy route or comedy in general is the future for me. And it's one of those situations where you can be funny in real life, but that doesn't mean you can do stand up. That doesn't mean you can be a comedy actor. You might just be comedy because you've dealt with a bunch of shit in the past, and you're just coping. So moving from something that was more dark and moving into a straight comedy, I knew from reading the script that the pacing on camera had to be great. And once we went into music, I mean, it's a very dialogue heavy script with two people for like 10 minutes sitting in one spot talking back and forth. The only thing that's going to move it forward is excellent music, pacing, comedic pacing, really. And even at that point, once we shot it, the next step was bringing on an editor that could understand comedic timing. You can't just go with any editor. And Griffin had edited Taste the Difference, who was also a friend of Nick's. So Nick introduced me to some people, and I've continued working with them. But it's also it's the writing, it's the acting, it's the directing. I think it's the music. I think it's the editing. It's all of when you're doing comedy. And I'm not here saying I'm an expert in comedy. I'm not. But for a film, the pacing is that, because we're not making a comedy from the '90s. It was different back then. Now the audience is more intelligent, I think, and they're not just looking for a bullshit laugh. They want to laugh at things that they kind of find funny about society. Yeah, life is a joke, you know.
Yeah, I agree with so much of that. And it is tough when you have to have all the right people in the right parts of the process of making a film, which I think is the case for any film, but especially with comedy. You know, the writing has to be on point. You have to have the right vision and direction for it, and then you have to have someone edit it properly. The actors have to be able to do it. You know, a lot of times I wonder how films get made. When
I don't even
there's
know how I don't even know how this one got made, man. To be honest with you, because it was difficult because I was nervous putting myself on camera because I didn't even remember the lines. I mean, I was worrying about so many other, like, I don't know how Ben Affleck does it. The man just does it a whole movie and directs it. I don't know, man. But yeah, man, I think I don't honestly, like, I'm sure Naveed can talk about this. Like, once you create something, like, sometimes you go back and you're like, how the hell did I do that?
yeah, Naveed, do you have any
Yeah.
input on that?
I mean, the good thing with music, you know, what, you know, we sort of, you know, it's a gift and a curse, right? Like, so, you know, we don't like, we have all these ideas, you know, before we get into it, right? Maybe, you know, looking at the script or looking at things, but you know, once I like to put things on screen once things are, you know, have formed a little bit, so that I can get a good grasp of the storytelling from a bigger perspective, you know, from a broader perspective. And you know, and the music has to fit in between, and like Sohale was saying, the pacing, the music is really important for the pacing, you know, because the music can also distract too. So you have to know when to go into the background and when to become a forefront kind of thing, you know. And so once everything's sort of, you know, on the screen, everything is established, you know, that's sort of when I like to kind of come in, and especially, you know, when the dialogue is, or ADR is already recorded, and even sound, you know, because sound was a big part of this film as well. You know, there are some key beats where, you know, sound effects takes the lead, and so the music kind of steps back. So I like to have, you know, as much as possible before the music goes in, and so that kind of helped a lot.
That's really cool. You're talking about how you have to, you know, music can distract, and you have to know when to step back, when to push it forward. And that leads me to the scene in the film.
The
Let
scene.
that scene, y'all, let's talk about it, because even I leaned into the screen on that scene.
It looked good on in theaters as well. I mean, the goal with that scene was that these actors, it's essentially the battle of the sexes. The entire short is a battle of the sexes in Hollywood and just society everywhere. But that scene in particular, I think, kind of solidified that, because these actors, they both think they have main character energy. They both think they're so good, so the only thing they can do is outdo one another. And they kind of outdo one another to the point where they actually convince themselves they've already booked the roles and they're in the movie. So the audience has to take that away as well. So when we're pushing in, I mean, the goal was, and I'm glad people kind of resonated with that, because the goal was that not only do the characters themselves convince themselves that that they've already booked it, and this is the final movie that we're looking at, this Hollywood sci-fi thriller, but the audience needs to believe it as well, and we need the audience to kind of move in with that. And then all of a sudden, the director completely not only takes the characters out of it, the audience comes out of it as well, and now we're back into this world that doesn't even make sense. I mean, nobody wants to be there.
Literally nobody wants to be there. which is a part of the comedy of the whole film. Nobody wants to be there, but this is just a part of the process. But yeah, that moment, that build up moment where it's pushing into them and they're locked in. And it's interesting because I remember watching that scene and also kind of trying to determine which one was the male and which one was the female character, because I watched it again and tried listening to the lines in the role reversal, and it's very ambiguous. Either one could play either one, and that's the magic of that script.
And that's the point of it. The point is we shouldn't be focusing too much on who is this person, what race are they, what gender are they, are these people talented, do they even have the talent to be in this Hollywood high, like how much are you paying these people, right? But we also wanted to make fun of the Hollywood movies because it's always the like Armageddon, it's always the man that goes off to war, but in this case, I mean, it's up to the audience to decide.
It is. No, it's great. And then on top of it being visually amazing and the chemistry between the characters, we also, of course, have this resounding music that just like really builds the tension on this scene. Naveed, tell me about your experience that influenced how you went about scoring that moment. And then of course being pulled back out into reality where the score goes back to what it was.
Yeah, I mean, initially, we just imagined that scene in sort of in a vacuum, kind of thing, where it's almost like a mini movie within a movie, right? And so that's the way I treated it. I did, completely disregard all the instrumentation around that scene, all the music and the harmony and everything around that scene, and focus on that scene as if it was one of those climactic scenes from Armageddon or something like that. So it was almost like starting a brand new project, and that was sort of the perspective. And the fact that each of these characters are trying to one up each other, as they're doing that, you'll hear the music kind of builds accordingly, until the music just kind of gets to this like almost like mountain, where at the end it's sort of like they're up in this sort of like imaginary world that they just created like right there on the spot, and sometimes I laugh, like there's real moments like this in cinema right now where it's this exact thing, it's like cookie cutter, and so we were playing that cliche up, and I think it went well, in terms of just kind of capturing, oh, like this is one of those cliche scenes. And I almost like sometimes in these very serious films, like I have like an inner laugh, almost, of like how funny is this, like when you kind of like separate yourself from it and look at what the music is and everything and how they're trying to kind of build this up. It almost has a funny cliche nature to it, where it's like we're crying right now, but this is hilarious, it's like it's really, it's fun. So that was a blast to kind of dig into that sort of cliche type of music, and then we just kind of snap out of it, right, and go right back into Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, no, it's it's such a fun part of the film. Just like really, like everybody just kind of like really hones in on this moment. It's awesome. So I really appreciated that about this film. So filmmaking is a tough thing. We were just explaining and talking about. Do you guys have insight or feedback or suggestions on people who might want to get into filmmaking and take on the kind of roles that you guys have in making film?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak on my experience because my degree is in English language and literature. My school didn't offer a film program, but at that time in college, I did. My mom told me, she's like, I didn't bring you to this country for you not to get a degree. So I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'll just get whatever degree I can. And at the time, I was like looking up different filmmakers and how they made it. I saw Christopher Nolan had a degree in English language and literature, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get a degree in English language and literature and see where it takes me. And I just honestly, my mentality is, if someone else can do it, I think I can do it too. All I have to do is learn the fundamentals of it and bring my own I guess, skill and craft in it, and that's what exactly what I did with Incension. I Looking back on Incension, I mean, I wish Nick wrote it, because I don't, now that I'm looking at it, I know I wrote and directed it. I don't think I don't think I'm a writer. I don't have the patience to be a writer, right? That's why now I work with, I have someone else write it. So it's also, I guess if you're looking for advice, I think one of the most important things is understand what you're really good at and focus on that, and then bring on the people that have the skill and talent necessary to bring your vision to life. Because if you think you can do it all yourself, you're a clown almost. You have this, and I was a clown. I had this ego of a 25-year-old, and I think when I first moved to LA, one of the things I said is, I'm not directing anything I don't write, which was like how ridiculous I sound now as an adult. So I think, yeah, just doing it, because just doing it teaches you what you're really good at. And then once you know what you're really good at, bring on the people that know exactly how to do what needs to be done to bring that vision to life. And that goes back to your previous question. Why do you work with the certain people that you work with? Because they're good at what they do, you know?
Yeah, Naveed, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, I agree with all of that. I mean, from the music perspective, you have to study the masters. So there's no way around that. Studying the masters is the key part of this. Understanding when music is necessary and when it's not is critical, because a lot of films you see just too much music and too much going on in the music fighting the dialogue a lot. So there are certain nuances to that you just have to study the masters, who John Williams and the biggest composers, and see what their approach is, and try to do that, but in your own way, basically. And so part of that has to do with your own brand, developing your own brand and sound. And sometimes it's not even necessarily your sound, but just your work ethic, or how much you're willing to push yourself. That becomes part of your brand. So those attributes, regardless of your music and talent, those attributes of how you work with others, how much you're willing to collaborate, and how flexible you are, and listening to feedback, that all is incorporated in your brand. So that's all important when it's all a collaborative effort, right? So I think that's a key part as well.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I think that's really great feedback and insight for people who might be interested or curious about getting into filmmaking. Um, cool. Let's go ahead and wrap up. And I kind of want to wrap up with a fun question. I'm super curious at what movie you guys are looking forward to this year. We have a whole summer blockbuster season coming up. What's on your radar for like your most anticipated film coming up?
I think yeah, sure. I think Tarantino's next film is coming out, The Film Critic. I don't know.
Oh,
I think it's coming out later this year, and if that's not coming out this year, then I guess I'm not seeing any other movie until it comes out. I'm on strike.
that's funny. Naveed, what do you think?
I'm looking forward to Alien, the Romulus one. That's going to be good. Um, Produced by Ridley Scott. So
Mm-hmm.
Should be
Nice.
good.
No,
Yeah. What about you,
good.
Thomas?
What about me? You know what? So I asked this question and didn't have an answer for myself already in mind. But the way
Okay.
that, well, it's interesting because I used to do the thing where we make top 10 most anticipated films of the year, and yeah, that's pretty common with the people that the journalists that do kind of what I do. But what I've realized is that a lot of times my favorite movies were not on my radar the year before. And so
Interesting.
I have gotten much more flexible about that. There are movies that I look forward to. And of course now I'm spacing on everything that's coming out. I guess Civil War comes out in a couple weeks, and that's one Alex Garland, that's one I'm really looking forward to. Um and I think I also have a really a renewed interest in Furiosa now that I've seen what sci-fi can be in this day and age
Yeah.
with Dune 2. There's a lot of really like big movies that I have a lot more faith in, because it's like we're finally putting the effort that movies deserve into big budget films. and I couldn't be happier about that. Dune 2 just blew me away. I have a new lease on life with, and then a renewed perspective on blockbusters now that I've seen Dune 2.
That's beautiful.
So we'll see, and I'm sure we'll have time another time in the future to catch up and maybe look back on what ended up being our favorite movies of this year. So
Absolutely, we'll be in touch.
I hope so. Sohale and Naveed, I really appreciate you guys taking this time again. Again, the film is main character energy. And actually, really quick before we go, can you tell us kind of what the future of this movie is, where people might be able to find it?
We just screened at Sedona International Film Festival. We're screening at Sarasota Film Festival as well on April 8th. Check out their website, get a ticket. I might be there. But after that, we're gonna I haven't decided exactly where I'm gonna put it, what the plans are. I have to discuss it with some other people on the team as well. But that's also a movie that I'm looking forward to coming out as well later. It's my own short film.
There you
because
go.
I want to see what the world has to say. You know,
absolutely.
You got to be proud of what you do.
We're also in discussion possibly releasing a few of the music pieces.
That would be really cool. Yep. You should.
Yep.
Okay.
That was a secret. He just told the world a secret.
ForReel exclusive
news.
Oh man, breaking news here. I love it.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, either parts of the film, the music, or like extended versions of them, because each scene could really be its own 1-2 minute piece. And why not? Life is short. We're all dying eventually. Let's do whatever we need.
Might as well put it out there, right?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with that more. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I hope a lot of people check this movie out, and again, I hope I get to talk to you guys in the near future.